back to red now, and they got a couple more options. They got some more cards in their hand. Remember, we could be playing properties as our actions. We could put another land down, grab another army card, or put a marketplace down. This one's quite a good card to have in your fief. A market town basically doubles the production capacity of a land. One of the actions that are available to us is to recruit an army card. Okay, so I could, as red player, as my action now, just go and grab an army card and put it in my reserves. If I've got a market town in my fief alongside a land, then instead of grabbing one army card, we can grab two. Okay, it doubles their capacity. The other thing is, when we come to a battle, which actually I think we're going to do now to demonstrate that, you can field only one army unit for every land. Okay, that's how many units you can field. How many armies units can you field into battle? One for each land. If you have a market town in your fief, then it doubles the capacity of the land. So now this land will allow you to field two army units into battle. Okay, so that's a good one to put down. So that's probably what I would do at this stage. But let's demonstrate instead how a battle would work. We've covered most of the actions now. I think we can place property into a fief. We can create a new fief with a castle. We can place a lord into a castle. We can recruit an army card if we have a land in play, or two army cards if we've got a land and a market town. We could play a political card, an intrigue, or a treachery. But the next thing we could do is we could attack another earl by raiding their fief, sieging their castle, or attacking the earldom's towers. So that's what red players are going to do. So they're going to declare, as their action, I'm attacking you. And they have to declare which of those three types of attacks they're making. Remember, they can attack their keeps, they can attack a fief, that's a fief as a whole, or they can siege the castle alone, just the castle. Let's consider each of those in turn. So let's say red chooses to attack the earldom's towers. I keep saying keep, but it's towers. The earldom's towers. The first thing we do after declaring an attack is we move this white Viking marker forward. Whenever an attacking action is taken by one of the players, we move the white Viking token forward. What that means is when we get to the Viking's turn, instead of bringing a black stone forward, all they do is move the white one back. So when the earls are fighting amongst themselves, it slows down by one turn the Vikings advance. Next, the attacking player, red, will field their forces for battle. Now, forces from battle come from different places. If they've got any face cards in their hand, then they can field them directly. It's costly, because remember, any cards that come from your hand, they get discarded. Okay, they get discarded. So if we had a vassal in our hand, we could field this, or if we had a prince in our hand, we could field this. Okay. It would bring each of these would bring a number of attack points to the game. Why don't we do that just to illustrate? Let's assume that they fielded this and they kept the prince. Okay? So this was turned into a tower. They have their prince stuck in their hand. We can field this prince as an attacking force. There's a handy guide in the reference sheet here that tells you the strength that each card will bring to the battle, okay, when you field them as a force. So a prince, for example, will send 1 damage and take 1 damage. Infantry sends and takes 1 damage. Vassals 1 and 1. There's a champion 2 and 1. Monks 0 and 1. Mercenaries 2 and 1. So that's their attack and defence, if you like. There's also the king card. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's a 1/1 card. And then this little summary here tells you how much damage. It's primarily 1 it takes to destroy property or a tower. Castles is 2, palaces is 3. Okay, so we fielded a prince. I'm going to use these little red tokens temporarily to illustrate the fact that this is going to generate red 1 strength, 1 attack strength. The other thing you can do is you can field lords from your castle. So if the prince was the lord of the palace, then instead of coming from our hand, it's a lord. Again, he's going to bring his 1/1 strength, but this time, because he's come from the castle, unless he's captured, which we'll talk about in a minute, and killed, he'll go back to the castle after the battle concludes. All right, so you're not losing into the discard pile. So it's the same principle. The other cards we can field are our army cards. We can bring those from our reserves. And remember, we can field 1 army card for every land we own in our earldom. If we have a market town alongside a land, then that land will support 2 army cards instead. We've just got 1 land, so we're just going to field 1 army unit. They are knights and they are infantry. An infantry is a 1/1. It's going to attack 1 and take 1 damage to be killed. A knight is slightly better. It does 2 attack, but again, it still just takes 1 to damage. Keep these secret. Your opponent doesn't know what you've got, but when you're attacking, you're going to have to field these. So again, I'll use a little marker here to illustrate the fact that we've fielded now 2 strength in units. There is a way to field units without having any land, and that's to have them in a garrison. And this is where mercenaries come in. If I show you a mercenary can be played from your hand, and it's kind of unique in being a face card that can be done so. But there's also a champion. We'll talk about those 2 now. If we look at the mercenary first, a mercenary can be placed in front of your earldom. And what the mercenary do, as well as being able to be fielded to battle in its own right, and this time it will bring 2. These guys are pretty good. They bring 2 strength attack. But the other thing is they can act as a garrison. And what that means is you can play cards anytime as a free action, army cards from your reserve alongside the mercenary, and there's only room for 1, as a garrison. This is what's known as a garrison slot. So you can have multiple mercenaries giving, they played face up, giving a garrison point for your army reserves. The champion, on the other hand, is like the other face cards. He can be played as a lord or from your hand and be fielded into battle. And once more, he provides 2 strength of attack. Okay. Now it's the opportunity of the blue player as the defender to field any defending forces. And his tower, remember, is what's under attack. 1 tower will fall for every point of incoming damage. So this would kill his tower. The other thing that the red player could do is attack the thief. Well, the first point of damage is going to be soaked up by the tower. If they had 2 towers here, then both points of damage will be soaked up. There's nothing to be worried about. It soaks them up. They don't get removed. These keeps remain on the board. Okay? So this tower is going to soak up 1 point of damage, and 1 is going to get through. And this one would take out the property. Remember, we're not attacking the castle, we're attacking the property that is attached to that castle. Okay? And every piece of land, every property attached to a castle, palace or castle, is destroyed by 1 point of incoming damage. So the defender has an opportunity to reply. Like the attacker, they can choose to field units from where they choose. So they can go to their hand and field units, or a lord from a castle. Now this lord, this vassal, is a 1/1. He's going to bring his own single point of damage to the battle. But before we conclude and we start assigning damage around, we go to this deck and we draw a battle card. The defender does this. They only draw a battle card if they field some defending forces. They have this lord from their castle here. So we draw a battle card and we reveal it. And there's 1 of 3 options. This one is called the Church Decides. Before we discuss this one, let's look at the other options. Predominantly, the battle deck is made up of these cards. This is a normal battle. All that happens is you resolve these points of damage. First, you allocate damage to any fielded forces. The attacker deals damage to his fielded forces first. It's best to assign it here first because a lord can take 1 damage and it's still going to return to its castle after he's finished the battle. Okay. In the case of army cards, if they take a point of damage, they're going to be killed. It doesn't matter whether they are played from the reserve or from a garrison. Okay, so better to play them to your face cards first. The defender here has 2 to soak up, so 1's going to go to the vassal, and then any remaining, before they hit the thief, will get soaked up by the tower. So the tower's done its defensive job, and the thief remains intact. Okay, that's a normal battle. This next one is called Attacker Wins. There's 15 normal, 3 attacker wins, 3 defender wins, and 3 church decides. So let's talk about attacker wins. Attacker wins means that only the attacker gets to allocate their damage. This 1 damage that comes from the vassal here is ignored. Defender wins is exactly the same, except this time it's only the defender's damage that goes through. Okay, the strength from the attacker is ignored. The only other difference is that if you get attacker wins or defender wins, any lords that take damage are then captured, and that means they're killed. They'll go off to the discard pile, but they can be ransomed. And what that means is that in the case of defender wins or attacker wins, if attacker wins, then the defender can ransom one of their properties or a castle, and instead of having the captured lord slain by the attacker, they can take it back. Okay, so that's attacker wins, defender wins. Church decides. This one's a bit more interesting because this one is governed by who controls the cathedral or the most churches. Only 1 person is allowed to have a cathedral in play at any one time, and that person becomes known as the Archbishop. The Earl who possesses the cathedral is the Archbishop. Possessing it means it's having it played in one of their fiefs. The Archbishop can decide, so it's their choice whether attacker wins, defender wins, or they play it out as a normal. Okay, so I guess their decision will depend on whether they're the attacker or defender. If there is no Archbishop, if there's no cathedral in play, then it will be the player who has the most churches. In the case of a tie, or if there's no churches, then it plays as a normal battle when you see church decides. There's one more type of attack that I've not shown you yet, and that is if you choose to attack not a tower, we're not raiding a fief, but instead we choose to siege the castle. In this case, all damage that gets through the tower defences and any fielded forces will get allocated to the castle. You can't partially hit a castle. Okay, so if you do 1 damage, a castle can take 2, the palace can take 3. So if you do 1 or 2 damage to a palace, it just gets swept away. Nothing happens because the palace remains. Okay, these don't carry over to another turn or anything like that. And remember, for castles, they can take 2 damage and then they're destroyed. The benefit here, or the cost if you're the defender, is that once the castle, whether it be a palace or a regular castle, once they're destroyed, remember this is the anchor for the whole fief. Okay, if this gets destroyed, then everything in it gets destroyed. Remember, destroyed means that it goes to the discard pile. Alright, so fielded forces take the damage first, then the tower, then the castle. So that's important in your decisions, whether you want to raid the fief or siege the castle. Depends on how much damage you think is going to get through. Have you got enough to take out the castle, or just 1 or 2 of the attached properties? Now, just before we finish up on this episode, where were we? Yeah, let's have everything back how it was. Before we finish up on this episode, I just want to tell you what happens when the Vikings come into play. Immediately that the 8th stone comes through, so at the end of the round, the 8th stone comes through, then the Vikings will attack. Now, there is a way to speed up this advance if you want. If you feel that you can win influence with the Vikings and use them against your opponent, then what you can do is send emissaries to the Vikings. The only two cards you can send to the Vikings as emissaries are vassals and monks. But you can only send emissaries from your hand. You can't take them out of your earldom and send them. So all you do, if you want to send the monk as an emissary to visit the Vikings, is discard from your hand, you move one black stone forward, and you win some influence. So what the blue player does here with this action is they place one of their cubes in the bag. So now there's two blues and one red in there. Okay, so blue is twice as influential over the Vikings as red right now because of the emissary they sent to visit them. And this is important because when the Vikings arrive, when the 8th stone gets placed down, you're going to draw a cube out of this bag, and whichever colour cube you draw is the player who will then control the Vikings. So blue being more likely, they sent more emissaries and have speeded up the advance. If they get drawn, will control the Vikings. And when this happens, we draw a number of Vikings equal to the number of players plus 1. So in our case, 3. There's two types of Vikings, infantry and chieftains. These act just like the army infantry, and these just like the army knights. These are 1-1, these are 2-1, okay? 2 attack, 1 defence. 1 attack, 1 defence. Okay? Now every turn from now on, at the end of every round, every time we hit the Viking's turn, we're going to draw another Viking. Okay? So they'll just keep growing this force. The thing is though, you draw from the bag every turn, okay? So it could be blue, it could be red. And importantly, these go back to the bag, alright? So your influence remains. You don't get drawn and discarded. Any cube that comes out of the bag goes right back in it. So this can only get bigger. Now the player controlling the Vikings is one control. They can either have them attack or have them not attack and instead wait until this army builds up. If they choose to attack, they can choose to attack themselves or their opponent, and it plays out just like a normal battle. These behave just like regular forces. They'll take casualties or they'll survive and go back ready to fight on another turn. The rules are exactly the same. Just before we finish up on this episode, I want to show you one more thing, and that is the king card. Okay, here's the king. At the beginning of the game, neither earl is crowned king. But what you can do on your turn as an action is you can play this banner. Banner has different meanings. We're going to look at jousts in the next episode. But the other thing you can do with a banner is you can play it to the table, and this signifies your claim to become king. You can only play one action per turn, remember, so you can only play one banner down to claim the title of king, but you need 2 more banners than any other player, and if you take an action, play a second, nobody else has got a banner out there, then you will be crowned king. But here's the thing, after playing one, another player may say, well actually, so red in response may also play a banner in claim to the title. This nullifies each other, okay, so now blue has to play 3 banners to have 2 more than red in order to claim the title of king. Alright, so fight. There's another trade-off here that you're battling with your opponent over the title of king. Once a player has been awarded the title of king, they play a second banner. Then they take the king card, there's only one of these, and they place it in their earldom. Now what the king's going to do is he's going to offer a garrison point, so you can garrison your armies here just like you can next to a mercenary. So that's another way of getting army units out if you don't have any lands. Use the king's royal army. Okay. And the other thing is that the king himself can be fielded into a battle. In battle he fights like a prince or a vassal. He's a 1-1. Okay. We'll talk about princes in the next episode when we look at jousts as well. So we'll cover those last two topics off. So there's the king card. The other thing is when you're crowned king, as soon as you're crowned king, any other players, in this case it's only 1 because we're playing 2-player, must, if they're able, give up 1 army card from their army reserve, and that gets garrisoned with the king. So the king's army is limited to number of players -1, so in a 2-player game it's just 1 army garrisoned here. If you're playing 4, 5 or 6, yeah, there's a second expansion that allows you to play up to 6 players. Then potentially you could have 5 armies garrisoned here with the king. much bigger royal army. Okay, join me next time. We'll talk about princes and jousts. Bye for now.